Some of the more eagle-eyed of you may have noticed that I've started riding my Trek. Now, I normally start doing this once spring's here, and this particular spring I've got a power meter fitted onto this bike. Now, I was sent this power meter by a company called Magine back last autumn, and I fitted it myself. But unfortunately, I didn't have a great opportunity to try it all out before the weather turned and I put the bike away over the winter. But like I say, spring's here now. I've got the bike out, I'm riding it, and I'm looking forward to trying out the power meter. I suppose that raises the question, why use a power meter at all? Now, many cyclists use them and the ultimate goal is to help you improve your speed, and the way it works is you do something called an FTP test, which gives you a particular power number, and you try and increase that, and if possible you also try and decrease your weight. And then you ultimately get something called your power to weight ratio, which is essentially your power FTP number divided by your weight to give you a watts per kilo figure. And the higher the watts per kilo figure, the faster you're going to go. Having a power meter means that you have an empirical measurement of your power output. And if you know your FTP, you can use this to structure your training a bit like you would with a heart rate monitor.
Last one.
Back last November, with the help of my friend Chris, I did my first ever FTP test, and the long and the short of that was that I had an FTP of 256 watts, meaning in theory I should be able to hold 256 watts for 1 hour. Now, this result did start setting the comments on the channel alight, ranging from people saying well done, congratulations, right up to people actually being offended and getting angry with me for having such a power number. Now, I do understand that the test that I did was a little bit controversial. It was only 5 minutes long, and I did an all-out effort for 5 minutes, and then a calculation was applied, and the number that we came out with was 256 watts. Now, I fully appreciate that a traditional FTP test is normally at least 20 minutes, preferably an hour, to get a fully accurate representation of one's FTP, but nevertheless that was the number that my FTP test, or that particular FTP test that I took, came up with. Now, a lot of people have actually been on, they've looked at my numbers, usually from rides from 2-3 years ago, where I haven't actually been trying to ride particularly fast. They've done their own calculations on it, and they've said to me, well, no, I think your FTP is actually closer to 150. Now that I actually have a power meter on my Trek, I can put those numbers to the test actually out on the road, and the initial results coming in are quite interesting. For example, I went out on Friday and I did my usual Bevis's Thumb, Harting Hill, down to Westbourne and then home run. It's about 40 kilometres and it takes me around about an hour and a half, and there is quite a lot of climbing in that. Now, for the first hour of that ride, I got to the top of the climb at Harting, and the average power for that hour was 205 watts. I then turned around on myself and I rode home, and the road back was pretty much downhill, but I didn't drop any power at all. I was still pushing reasonably hard. I wasn't going, all out. I would say my effort was about 75%. And that did also include a fairly long 20-minute section at the beginning where I was just warming up and just trying to, get comfortable on the bike. So I wouldn't say it was a true representation of my full FTP, but nevertheless, after 90 minutes of cycling, when I got home, my average power was still 205 watts. Even as I'm saying this now, I can see Captain Calculator scribbling the numbers down and desperately crunching them away to try and disprove the fact that I was riding with an average power of 205 watts for 90 minutes. I can even hear them saying things like, but was the power meter correctly installed? Yes, it was. Is the power meter correctly calibrated? Yes, it is. Is it running the latest firmware? Yes, it is. Basically, there's no logical reason why the readings from that power meter should be inaccurate. I rode for 90 minutes with an average power of 205 watts. There it is. I think the next thing I really do need to try is to ride for an hour and try and push it just as hard as I possibly can to do a proper, very accurate FTP test. And if it does differ from the 256 watts that we calculated back in November, then all well and good. But if it doesn't, or if it's indeed any higher than that, I seriously doubt that for a moment, but that will be accurate as well. At the moment though, it's very early days with me using this power meter. I have to say I am enjoying it. The numbers are very, very useful for me. I can see I've got the way I've got the computer set up is that I've got the actual power output on one of the fields, and then on the field next to it on my cycling computer, it's giving me the accumulated average, a bit like an average speed on a regular cycling computer. And obviously if I'm cycling along doing or putting out quite a lot of power and then I stop for any length of time, or if I ride nice and easy for any length of time, that is going to bring the average power down. But so far the numbers are looking fairly encouraging, and I think ultimately it is going to help me to improve my speed. Already I can see where I'm going wrong, because I'm doing the calculations in my head thinking, well, okay, if my power output is 205 watts, I know what my weight is, I'm doing the division sum in my head, and my power to weight ratio is coming out, and that is not very impressive. So in a perfect world I'd be losing some weight and increasing my power, and overall that would just give me a lot more speed. I'll be the first person to admit though that power meters aren't for everyone. Firstly, they're quite expensive, and secondly, if you're just a regular cyclist out cycling for fun or just general fitness, I would say that they're not actually going to be of great benefit to you. But if you want to get faster, and if you can afford to buy one of these power meters, then yes, I think absolutely it's a bit of a game changer when you start training on power. Thanks for watching.